Hey everybody, we're back at it. We have now brought 2 units to a stirring conclusion. Hopefully you've been doing okay on the exams so far. We are now about halfway through the semester. But today is the first day of the rest of your semester, and it's easy enough to figure out exactly how we need to improve our performance going forward. Hopefully you're doing awesome, and in the off chance that you got to turn stuff around, what you gotta do is watch these lectures when I assign them. Don't wait until before the exam. Watch it when I assign them. It'll be a lot easier to keep up with the class. Make sure you're taking notes. Contact me if you have any questions about the stuff I'm presenting here. Regardless, I'm doing the best I can to provide you all the tools that you need to succeed in this class. And you need to rise to the occasion by doing everything you can to make sure you're taking your time to understand this material rather than just cramming. So please enjoy this conversation. I'll let you know it's one of my favorite conversations this semester, which is civil liberties. Don't confuse these with civil rights. That's the next chapter. I'll contrast the two for you here before long. For now, this is, I would say, 3 chapters. I've said this before, but 3 chapters are probably more important than all the other chapters in this text. Chapter 1, Chapter 2 on the Constitution. Chapter 9 on Congress, very important. I would argue the most important chapter of Unit 3, and one of the 3 most important chapters is Chapter 4 on civil liberties. It's important to understand, but also important to grasp the fact that it causes a lot of reasonable disagreement in our politics. So let's go ahead and talk about civil liberties. Let's start off with the basics. Okay, civil liberties are 2 things. First, they restrain the government. They restrain the powers of the government. Second thing is they protect individuals. That's what civil liberties are supposed to do. They're supposed to protect you and I, the individual, from the powers of the government. The powers of the government. Now, generally speaking, we get most of our civil liberties from the Bill of Rights. They almost all come from these first 10 amendments. That, of course, by the way, as we talked about in Chapter 2, if it wasn't for these civil liberties, we wouldn't have a Constitution. The Constitution was on the verge of failing and not being ratified here in America simply because it lacked a list of individual rights. But civil liberties, these 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights, give us our civil liberties. And despite the fact that they are broadly things that we agree on. Like, for instance, freedom of speech. I'm willing to bet everybody listening to this wants freedom of speech. I'm willing to bet we all do. Despite the fact that we agree broadly on what these civil liberties are, we agree that we should have them, they're still very controversial because they often pit reasonable desires against each other. For instance, and we talked about this in Chapter 1, we very much desire freedom in our society. But at the same time, we also desire an orderly society, a safe society. And as we talked about before, the more you go towards one end of the equation, the more you're leaving the other behind. The more for order you are, the less freedom you'll have. The more freedom you want, the less order you're risking. So oftentimes, we debate, like, clearly we should have freedom of speech, but how free should our speech be? Well, we can end up having pretty intense debates about that, despite the fact that you and I both agree that we should have freedom of speech. Now, we'll be getting to freedom of speech eventually. Now, it's worth noting that even though civil liberties are one of the key debates we have with each other in our society, oftentimes they're not that controversial. In some realms. Like, for instance, we all largely agree that there should be a habeas corpus. That before the habeas corpus is Latin. Latin for have a corpse or have a body, essentially is what it's saying. And this is in the Constitution. It says, the government cannot have my body. In other words, the government can't put me in jail or in prison without trying me fairly, without putting me on trial and proving that I need to be there. Habeas corpus, even though it looks like it's habeas Habeas. It's Latin for you. It's Latin. Now, on top of that, we also largely agree on bill of attainder. We don't think the government should be in the business of maybe not even throwing you in jail, but even punishing you. The government shouldn't be in the business of punishing you or fining you without a trial, without finding that you have been guilty of something. Like, for instance, if the government wants to punish, like, a cereal company by passing a law saying the cereal company, I don't know why I'm thinking of cereal, I guess because I'm hungry, but before they can start punishing people for such and such things, they must find that they have been guilty. That means we cannot throw you in jail, and we cannot punish you in any way in fining you. It's unconstitutional for a bill of attainder to happen. Now, on top of that, we also largely agree on ex post facto. This is Latin for after the fact. That's what ex post facto means, after the fact. But this means, of course, you can't punish somebody for doing something that was legal at the time. Like, for some reason, if we legalize, well, let's actually talk about vaping. Vaping right now is legal. Juuls right now are legal. And if someday, like, there have been a ton of studies on these things, particularly Juuls, and they find that the Juuls are very, very bad. They're like cigarettes on steroids. And so as the result, if we ever ban Juuls, but you use a Juul right now while it's legal, we can't arrest you for using it back right now when it's legal. But aside from that, we have many instances where these civil liberties that we cherish are the subject of really intense debate in our society, such as, to what extent should we be allowed to burn the flag?
Professor Gutterman said that it is legal to burn the flag. A lot of people find that activity unacceptable. And to find out what local residents think, we took it to the streets of downtown Syracuse. So do you think it should be legal or illegal to burn the flag?
I think it should be illegal.
And why is that?
I think that anybody that burns the flag should be in jail.
So you think it should be illegal?
It should be illegal, yes.
Legal, but done in the right way.
Well, it's been decided by the Supreme Court to be legal.
They have a ceremony, a special ceremony during the summer.
But it's an extremely poor taste, and it is inflammatory, so it's something that is done, it should be rarely done, if at all, and it should be very careful how you do it because it's very inflammatory.
I'm a veteran, and I don't agree with burning the flag.
I believe it used to be illegal. I might be wrong.
We did fight for freedom in this country, and if we start arresting people for freedom of speech, then that's wrong.
Except under certain exceptions, like when the flag is worn out, tattered, and then you have a particular ceremony for burning them.
All right, so you get the idea. They are arguing over burning a flag, which is a reasonable thing to argue about. Clearly, we hold the flag in America. Generally speaking, we hold it to be sacred. There are laws saying that there are certain ways you can't alter the flag, like you can't wear the flag as clothing. But that seems to run against our First Amendment rights of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Should we carve out exceptions in the freedom of speech for that kind of stuff? You know, reasonable people can disagree, and I think all those people that you're listening to are being reasonable. Just because you disagree with somebody doesn't mean that they're not being reasonable in the conversation. Now, for the record, let's walk through some of these civil liberty rights. And whenever we talk about civil liberties, the stuff that we start with the First Amendment rights. And actually, the very first right mentioned in the very First Amendment is freedom of religion. And we'll break this down here in just a bit. But what freedom of religion generally means, it means that our American government is secular. It's secular. Now make sure you understand what secular means. Secular gets a bad rap. People don't fully understand what secular means. Secular means non-religious. The government is supposed to be non-religious. That doesn't mean anti-religious, right? Anti-religious means I'm coming for your religion, I'm going to take you down. But no, non-religious simply means we are not going to take a stance on religion. We are neutral when it comes to religion. That's supposed to be the disposition of the government according to the First Amendment. Now, that does lead to the fabled wall between church and state. This phrase is not actually in the Constitution, but it has been, the First Amendment essentially means there's supposed to be a wall between church and state. Although, in reality, it's not really a wall. It's more of a beaded curtain. The government and religion intersect quite a bit. They intersect quite a bit. Like, for instance, let me give you an example. This church, let me move my head here. I have just set this church on fire, okay? This church in your neighborhood has been struck by lightning or something, and now it's on fire. And if you are not religious, let's say you're not a Christian, maybe you're another religion, maybe you're Hindu or something, and you're standing in your front lawn, you see a church burning, and you're like, oh, man, that's really sad. You hate to see any building go up. You hate to see a church go up in flames. That's really sad. And then you notice something. You notice that a fire department, funded by your tax dollars, begins wheeling out a fire truck, paid for by your tax dollars, staffed by firemen and firewomen, paid for by your tax dollars. They roll down the street to the burning church. They hook up a hose to a fire hydrant, you pay for with your tax dollars, and they use that hose and all of these government resources to put out the fire on the land. You may be saying to yourself, if you're Hindu or non-religious or anything, and you're standing in the lawn and you're looking at that and you're like, wait a minute, the government is helping a religious institution by putting out this fire? That's a violation of church and state. Now, what do you think? Is that a violation of church and state? Now, you clearly know the answer is no. It's not a violation because we see this stuff happen in our society. But let me ask you this question. Why is it not a violation of church and state? Now, if you're saying to yourself, well, you know, the fire could spread beyond the church grounds and start affecting other homes that aren't religious. Okay, so maybe the fire department should just stand by, wait for any fire to cross the property line and hose it off, and then wait and just let the religious institution burn. I mean, do you want to use a government resource to put out a fire at a church? Guys, the answer is, of course, the fire department will put out the fire at the church because not doing so is anti-religious. They'll put out a fire at a church. They'll put out a fire at a mosque, at a synagogue, at, you know, wherever atheists gather, maybe a library, wherever it is you pesky atheists have your club meetings. So, generally speaking, it's not that the government has to avoid religion like a plague. It just can't treat religion any differently among the religions and, of course, among everything else in society. The government is not anti-religious. It's simply non-religious. It's simply secular. It can't show favoritism. But like I said, aside from this, the government and religion do intersect quite a bit in our society. Just some examples you don't need to know necessarily, like the government giving money to Catholic hospitals. That happens quite a lot. We should know that here in Springfield. We have a gigantic Catholic hospital, which is Mercy. On top of that, the government gives money to religious preschools. My kid actually goes to one of those, Kids of Creation, a Wesley Methodist here in Springfield, Missouri. Most religious institutions don't have to pay taxes on their offerings, on their donations that they get. Religious charities are often government subsidized. So religion and government do work together on a regular basis. It just can't show religion any favoritism. And of course, it can't show one religion favoritism among the others. Which brings us to the actual First Amendment itself. Here it is. I don't need you to read it or anything. And as always, I will never ask you to recite the Constitution to me. So you don't need to memorize what the Constitution actually says. But you do need to know what the Constitution gives us, okay? So the very first thing it gives us is freedom of religion. And freedom of religion actually has two prongs to it. In other words, two parts of freedom of religion in the First Amendment. The first part, here's the exact language of the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. What you're reading right now is called the Establishment Clause. That you do need to know. That's the first prong of freedom of religion, is the Establishment Clause. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Now, the Establishment Clause argues that the government can't endorse or establish an official religion. Okay, now America demographically is overwhelmingly Christian. Okay, I am Christian myself, but constitutionally we are not a Christian country. We are a secular country. Okay, with religious people in it. There's a big difference there, right? But the government can't endorse or establish an official religion. Put more plainly, and I like this because it rhymes. This is very true, but this is also very true of the Establishment Clause. The government can't promote or demote one religion from the others. One more time, the government can't promote or demote one religion from the others. Okay, it can't promote or demote one religion from the others. Like, for instance, if I am a politician and I propose a Christian tax cut, if you are a Christian in my society, you get a tax cut. If you are not a Christian, you have to pay the full taxes that you're owed or something like that. What am I doing with that law? I am clearly promoting Christianity, right? And as a result, that can't be allowed. It can't be allowed. Now, on top of that, maybe let's demote a religion now, right? Now, if you are a Christian in my district, you have to wear a yellow armband or something to let us know that you're a Christian so we can see you coming, so we can denote you as a Christian citizen. Now, obviously, what am I doing with that law? I am clearly demoting Christianity with that. So neither one of those are permissible because you're demoting one religion, or in another example I gave, you're promoting one religion from the others, and you can't do that. You need to be treating all these religions the same. Now, those are obvious examples. Those are obvious violations of the Establishment Clause. But this stuff can get complicated in a hurry, thanks to you guys. A lot of you have just gotten out of public school. A lot of you have just gotten out of high school. Here you are. Some of you are still in high school taking this class. But a lot of you are fresh out of high school, and here you are taking a class at OTC. And when you're in high school, a lot of establishment cases can get really complicated when it comes to high schools, because high schools are government buildings. You know, public school is government buildings. Government's supposed to be secular, but it houses a lot of religious students, and that can get real complicated in a hurry, okay? Like, for instance, have you ever wondered why it's allowed? Like, when I went to high school, I was in FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, okay? When you were at your high school, were you in FCA? You at least were aware that they existed, right? Why is FCA allowed to meet on campus? That's a religious organization on campus, like it's a high school. Why are they allowed to meet on the school grounds? That's a religious organization. Why is the school allowing that? And of course, the answer is, that the school will allow religious groups to meet. It just can't say some religions can meet and other religions can't meet. Like, clearly, if I'm a Muslim and I want to start Fellowship of Muslim Athletes, if there is such a thing, I can do that. The school's saying you can't use school grounds for FMA, but you can use it for FCA. That's a violation of the Establishment Clause, right? That's a violation of the Establishment Clause. Now, what about atheists? What if I want to start a Fellowship of Atheist Athletes? And the school says, no, you can't use school grounds for the FAA. You can use it for FCA, but not FAA. Have I violated the Establishment Clause? What do you think? Huh? What do you think? Well, the Supreme Court has weighed in on that. And even though atheists will bristle at the idea that atheism is a religion, the Supreme Court says we are going to protect atheism as if it were a religion. So yeah, if you're saying that you can use school grounds for Christian clubs and for Muslim clubs, but not for atheist clubs, you violated the Establishment Clause. Okay? Now, those examples I gave you have definitive answers. There are other instances where there aren't definitive answers. Okay, let me give you an example. If there is your football team has senior night, which is like their last home game, and all the seniors before the game get introduced with their parents, and we all get to celebrate them. We've known them for several years. This is the last time we're going to get to see them play here at home. It can be emotional. And maybe the student body president is at the 50-yard line using a PA system, reading into the microphone their names and their parents. And we all get to clap for them and celebrate them, and it's kind of emotional because this is our senior year. It's the last time we'll get to see them play. What if the student body president interrupts the proceedings and says, guys, I'm sorry everybody, as I'm speaking into a microphone, I'm sorry everybody, I'm just really emotional right now, I'm just really filled with the Spirit. Can I ask everybody who's here right now, bow your head, I'm going to say a prayer. And I speak into the microphone. Dear Heavenly Father, we blah 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 blah. Have I violated the Establishment Clause? There are reasonable arguments on both sides, aren't there? One argument, I have violated it because I'm using a government event, which is a school football game. using a government PA system, using the microphone to promote my religion, to pray to you. So clearly I have violated the Establishment Clause, right? Well, I don't know, maybe not, because at the same time, it's not like I planned this or anything like that. I'm just a student with my own religion, and I'm wanting to share that religion. You can blow me off or ignore me. I don't know, is that establishment or not? What do you think? Okay, and we can tinker with that. Like, what if instead of me just doing it in the heat of the moment, I was planning to read a prayer the whole time? Does that violate establishment? What if I'm not the student body president? What if I'm a faculty member? What if I'm a teacher? What if I'm the principal? Does that change your equation? So, you know, these establishment cases can get really complicated in a hurry. And for the record, courts have tried to deal with that by creating a test, because it's really hard to know sometimes when things violate the Establishment Clause. So courts have come up with several tests. The most influential of these tests, even though courts technically don't use it anymore, is known as the Lemon test. And even though, like I said, they technically don't use it anymore, it does inform the tests that they do use. So let's talk about the Lemon test real quick. And once again, what we're trying to figure out is, have we violated the Establishment Clause or not? Have we violated the Establishment Clause or not? So the Lemon test actually asks us, and it's known as the Lemon test because it's named after a Supreme Court case called Lemon v. Kurtzman. You don't need to know that. I just want to let you know we're not naming it after the citrus, okay? Anyways, the Lemon test asks several questions. The first question it asks is, what's your intent? Do you have secular intent? You have to have secular intent. Now, clearly, if I'm advocating for a Christian tax cut, I am clearly intending to benefit Christians. Therefore, I do not have secular intent, right? And I have violated the Establishment Clause. Christians have to wear a yellow armband. Or Christians can meet on campus. When you went to high school, did you ever do see you at the pole? Once or twice a year, you gather around and you pray around the flagpole. And Muslims try to do that, and you're like, you can't do that here, not on this school grounds. We'll allow see at the pole, but not you. I mean, clearly, we have the intent to demote Islam, right, if we do that. And as a result, we don't have secular intent. So intent, very important. What's the intent here? Sometimes, though, your intent is okay. Your intent is okay, but the effects of what you're doing, what we call the primary effect of what you're doing, does promote or demote a religion. Like, for instance, if there is, let me tell you something, because it's actually October right now. My family went to a pumpkin patch, and we got pumpkins, and we have them out front. And then somebody stole them a couple days ago. I don't know if they were hungry or whatever, or maybe kids just trying to make a mess or something, but my pumpkins were stolen. That's very irritating. But let's say that everybody's crap is getting stolen off their front porches across the city of Springfield, and City Council has said that is enough. There have been a rash of front porch burglaries. You know what? We're coming up with a new ordinance here in Springfield, in this hypothetical. The ordinance says, if anybody is on your front porch without your permission, the police can arrest them. Now, that thing I've just talked about a moment ago, that ordinance I've just created, is there any, is the intent that I've come up with secular? Of course, I'm intending to protect your stuff on your porch. But you could say that there's an effect, a primary effect that hurts, Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and people that go door to door and try to evangelize their religions. I don't know, do you agree that that's the primary effect, to promote or demote a religion? They would certainly argue that you're demoting our religion. You didn't intend to, but since the primary effect, it does, that's just as bad as intending to all along. So even though my intent is fine, I can still run afoul of the Establishment Clause. There's a third question the Lemon test asks, and that's what we call excessive entanglement. Are you excessively entangling church and state? Now, the court doesn't really define excessive entanglement. So this is kind of just an umbrella term for, is church and state getting too close for your comfort? Now, that's a judgment call. what might be fine for me might be offensive to you. Certainly that's the case when we get to speech. We'll talk about speech here in a few. But these are the three questions that the Lemon Test asks. If you run afoul of any of the three, you have violated the Establishment Clause. Now, like I said, courts have largely moved away from the Lemon Test. They embrace other tests, such as the neutrality test, which has the benefit of being simple. We're really just asking one question. Is the law in question, or whatever it is we're arguing about, maybe it's not a law, maybe it's a presidential action, but we are arguing about, is whatever it is we're arguing about neutral to religion? Is the law neutral to religion? Now, the nice thing about that is it's simple. But the downside is it's vague. And you and I might have completely different notions of what's truly neutral and what's not neutral. For instance, when you drive through Christmas displays on public parks, like if you ever go down to Ozarks, Missouri, and go through like the Finley River Park, they have a gigantic lighting display every Christmas. You should do it. It's very pretty. If you have kids, it's great too. Kids love it. But they have little baby Jesus, a little lighting display of little baby Jesus on a public park. But courts have largely found that even though baby Jesus is Jesus Christ, literally Jesus Christ, that it serves more of a cultural, more of a historical thing than it is a religious thing. So it's neutral to religion to have a lighting display of Jesus Christ as a baby for Christmas displays on public parks. Now, do you agree with that? Do you disagree with it? I mean, is it neutral enough for you? We can have disagreements over that. Anyways, like I said, the freedom of religion has two prongs to it. There are two prongs to the freedom of religion. The first is the Establishment Clause, which we just got done talking about. The second, this is the actual constitutional language right here. The second prong is known as the Free Exercise Clause. It is the second prong to freedom of religion. The Free Exercise Clause argues that you have a constitutional right to freely exercise your religion and the government can't interfere. The government cannot interfere with your free exercise of your religion. It can't do that. Matter of fact, in certain circumstances, we go above and beyond that. The government actually needs to make reasonable accommodations, whatever reasonable means, but reasonable accommodations to make sure you can practice your religion. For instance, if you happen to be a particularly devout Muslim going to a public school, if you're particularly devout, that means you need to pray a certain number of times throughout the day, including what might be during class. School districts need to make reasonable accommodations to make sure if you're one of those students that we accommodate you, we allow you to excuse yourself for a moment, kind of like a bathroom break for some. You can excuse yourself for a moment so that you can go in the hallway or somewhere appropriate and say your prayers. So the government must not only not interfere with your religion, it can actually make reasonable accommodations to make sure that you can practice it freely. Let me ask you a question, though, when it comes to free exercise of religion. Is this right absolute? Is this right absolute? What do you think? Yes or no? Go ahead and guess. You got a 50% chance. The answer is no, it's not absolute. It's not absolute. There's any number of instances where the government can interfere with your free exercise of your religion. Let me just say that again. The government can regulate your free exercise of your religion. Matter of fact, anytime you see the word absolute, you should know that that's a red flag and when it comes to government and politics, because there's always exceptions to exceptions to exceptions. Nothing is absolute. But anyways, is the right of free exercise absolute? No, because the government can regulate your free exercise of your religion, but it needs a compelling reason to do so. So the government needs a compelling reason if it's going to crack down on your free exercise of your religion. Let me give you a couple examples that you don't need to know, but you're welcome to jot them down if it helps you. For instance, if you perform the religious practice that some people do for animal sacrifice, the government can. We have found it in a Supreme Court case. The government can ban Santeria, which is animal sacrifice. It can ban that because we have a compelling interest in making sure that like little woodland creatures aren't being maimed for no reason or for, spurious reasons, or because we just care about the welfare of animals. On top of that, use of drugs. This is another famous court case from the 60s. Under what circumstances can you use a drug in a religious ceremony? This is known that some Native American tribes have used peyote, which is a hallucinogen. You take it and it gives you a hallucination, which is kind of a religious experience for some tribes. I don't know enough about it. My apologies. Anyway, should that be allowed? Well, the Supreme Court said the government can ban drugs which you use in religious ceremonies if the government wants to. It can ban peyote because we have a compelling interest in making sure people stay off drugs, right? Now, since that ruling, there have been rules carved out since saying that you can use peyote if it's during a religious ceremony, you're a member of the tribe, you're a member of the community, you're on the reservation. I can't just roll on to a reservation tomorrow and be like, let's get religious. I'm not allowed to do that. You can only use peyote under certain circumstances. Now, on top of that, if your religion mandates that you commit terrorism, clearly the government can ban terrorism. Hopefully it does. It can ban terrorism, even though you think your religion tells you that you need to go out and hurt people that don't follow your religion. The government can crack down on that. You're not allowed to freely exercise terrorism, right? Or throwing virgins into volcanoes or whatever it is. Whatever number of religious exercises may involve harming or killing people, obviously. All right, so that's freedom of religion. Like I said, it's got two prongs, the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. No both. Let's talk about free speech. We know free speech pretty well. I probably don't need to define speech for you because it's what I'm doing right now, speaking blah, 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 blah. I'm exercising speech. Now, I will let you know that free speech includes more than just what I'm doing right now. It includes symbolic gestures. So, for instance, taking a knee during the national anthem, I'm not speaking when I do that, but it's a symbolic gesture that's constitutionally protected. So freedom of speech is what it's called, but the courts define it as freedom of expression, like wearing the clothes I want to wear, acting the way I want to act. If I want to put my fist up as a show of solidarity with certain communities, or if I want to, if I want to do an obscene gesture with my body to offend somebody that I'm really mad at, that's constitutionally protected. You're constitutionally allowed to be a jerk. You are allowed to be a jerk constitutionally. Now, on top of that, people aren't the only people that have free speech rights. Businesses have free speech rights. Organizations have free speech rights. Even though they don't look like us, they aren't born, they don't die. They are organizations, but they too have free speech rights. And interestingly enough, money. We'll talk about this more in Chapter 8, but money is a form of free speech. The courts have ruled that money is speech. When I donate $20 to your cause, that's constitutionally protected because I am symbolically saying with my $20 that I like you $20 worth, whatever that means to me. So there's lots of different shades to free speech. Perhaps we should know it more broadly as freedom of expression. Now, let me ask you a question here about free speech. See that red box? Looks familiar, right? Let me ask you something. Is the right to free speech absolute? Yes or no? No! Of course it's not. There are plenty of instances, stand by. There we go. There are plenty of instances where speech isn't constitutionally protected. Let's talk about a few of those instances. One of the most obvious ones is the clear and present danger test. The clear and present danger test says that any speech that creates wait for it, clear and present danger. Any speech that creates a clear and present danger is obviously not allowed. Okay, so this is the classic yelling fire in a crowded theater. If you're at the release of the next Marvel movie, right now, again, I'm in October of 2021. The Eternals is coming out real soon. I can't wait to see it. Hopefully I'll be there on opening night. And when I'm there, If in the middle of the movie, I think it'd be really fun to yell fire. Everybody freaks out. They start trampling each other to get out. People get really hurt. And they may decide to sue me because I yelled fire. I can't stand in the court and be like, hey, free speech. I was just, fire was in my heart. I had to let it out. That is not defended because obviously if I yell that just for giggles, if there's an actual fire, I can yell it. But if I'm just yelling it for giggles, I'm creating a clear and present danger. In addition to the clear and present danger test, there's also the imminent lawless action test. And as the name suggests, I'm advocating for lawless actions. I'm inciting a riot, or I'm trying to persuade somebody to break the law. Like, you know what you need to do? You need to murder such and such. And if you actually go out and do it, I can be held at least one of the responsible parties for the murder. I can't go in front of a judge and be like, hey, it was just freedom of speech. I was just trying to tell him he should murder somebody. I didn't, that doesn't matter. If I am convincing somebody to break the law, I'm in trouble. On top of that, this is interesting, but the Supreme Court has said that obscene speech is not constitutionally protected. People can ban obscene speech. This is really strange, though, because the courts have long said that obscene speech is not protected, but the courts have also refused to tell us what's obscene. Courts have never ruled that anything is obscene ever. And so we just know that obscene speech is not protected theoretically, but the courts have never come down and said, well, that's obscene. So to be honest with you, while we're aware of what obscenity is, we have no actual examples of what would reach the threshold of obscene. We just don't know. It's never been decided. Now on top of that, hate speech in some contexts, like if I'm standing on a soapbox downtown and I'm like, we should take all Jewish people and throw them in the river, and everybody's like, yeah, that is constitutionally protected in some places. In other places, in some states and some communities, they crack down on that pretty aggressively. I suppose that would be like inciting a riot, right? Let's do more pure hate speech, where I'm standing on a soapbox and I'm like, all women are evil. We should all not like women. I'm not actually advocating that anybody break a rule. I'm just advocating for hating women. And that's constitutionally protected in some parts of the country, some states, but other states have tried to crack down on hate speech and such. Your freedom of speech is also limited at school. You probably know that. Every time you set foot on a high school campus, all your rights just gone. You have no rights, essentially, when you're on a public, because we have a compelling interest in making sure that schools are safe, right? Same thing with your job. Free speech does not protect you to keep your job. You can be fired for being mean to a customer. You won't be thrown in jail for telling a customer to go jump in a lake. You'll be fired for that. But you won't be thrown in jail for it. Now, a sister clause of free speech is free press. I say it's a sister clause because really all of the same protections you get for free speech, the press get. Okay, the press, the journalists, news publications, they get the same free speech protections that you and I get, and they're also subject to the same exceptions. Like, they can largely print whatever they want, but they can't tell people to go murder these people, or they can't, they can't engage in obscenity, whatever that might mean. So they're subject to the same protections that you and I get in our speech. They're also subject to the same exceptions to that. Although I will let you know, give you just a minute on that. I will let you know that there are additional areas where the Constitution does not protect the press in ways it does protect you and I. You and I get certain protections that the press doesn't. And that is, in short, you and I have the freedom to defame. I can defame as a person. I can defame anybody I want. Okay? Like, I can accuse you of being let's go back to murder, shall we? I can accuse you of being a murderer. I can do that. You are a murderer. I can defame you as a person. As a press outlet, though, your reach is generally going to be larger than any one person. Like, what's my reach anyways? Like, with social media, is my reach like a few hundred people? You probably have similar reach, if not greater reach on social media as well, to say, I am not a murderer. But if you're a press outlet, then you got two things. First of all, you probably have a larger following than any one person does. Most people anyways. Second of all, as a news outlet, people generally give you the benefit of the doubt that they don't give like average Joes like you and me. And so CNN can't print a story or report a story saying that you're a murderer, unless, of course, you are a murderer. If you're a murderer, then they can say that. But if they get that wrong, if they say you're a murderer and turns out you've never been convicted of murder, then you can argue that they've wrongfully hurt your reputation and you can sue them. Now, I can accuse you of being a murderer and be completely wrong, but you can't sue me for that. I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to defame you, but the media isn't allowed to defame you. Now, they can defame you in a couple different ways. Like, obviously, they can defame you by reporting it, by broadcasting it on radio, on TV. If I make a false statement, that's what slander is. That's when I'm broadcasting on a TV, broadcasting on a podcast, saying it in a movie. I'm slandering you through, I'm defaming you through slander. Now, I can also print it on my blog, on my news site, in a newspaper, in a magazine. That's libel. I can defame you via libel. So slander is when we're saying it and broadcasting it. Libel is when we're printing it or when we're writing it. Now, I just want to stress that you and I have the freedom to defame. We can defame individually, but news media outlets are not allowed to do that. We'll talk about that more in Chapter 6. Now, you might be wondering, if they're reporting a whole bunch of stuff that's clearly wrong about celebrities, like, how do tabloids get away with it? How are tabloids allowed to report stuff that is, how are tabloids allowed to, promote ridiculous stories about celebrities that aren't true? Well, you and I, if CNN accuses you or me of murder and we have not been convicted of murdering anybody, we can just sue them straight up. It doesn't matter what CNN intended. CNN got a bad fact about us that hurts us in our lives. It's going to be hard for me to get jobs if every time somebody Googles my name, Andrew Crocker the murderer shows up from CNN.com, right? So all we have to prove is that CNN got it wrong. But it's different for public figures. Public figures must prove, first of all, that what the news media outlet printed was wrong, but they also must prove that there was actual malice, meaning the media intended to get this stuff wrong, to defame and hurt them. So that's one of the reasons why you and I have greater leeway to sue outlets than like Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt can't really sue an outlet for getting a fact wrong unless he can also prove they intended to get it wrong. And that's hard to prove. How do you prove intent? Intent is what's going on in someone's head. Like, in order to prove intent, like, if I, the editor, will have to write an email saying, oh man, we should print this. It's not true at all, and it's really going to screw with Brad Pitt. I have to print the email out and like leave it on a park bench somewhere for Brad Pitt himself to find. Okay? That's how hard it is to prove actual malice. So, for the most part, public figures have a real rough go of it trying to prove this stuff. But private individuals, we can sue very easily just in terms of them getting stuff wrong about us that hurts our reputation. There are other First Amendment rights that I will buzz through because I don't care about them as far as this class is concerned, and I won't ask you about them. You do have the right to peaceably assemble. You also have the right to petition the government, even though there's no real petitioning mechanism. You can petition the state government, and you can actually change state law and state constitution through that here in Missouri. But federally, there's no real option. There used to be a website like petitions.whitehouse.gov. It's a fascinating website. I hope they bring it back, but right now it's defunct. If you click on that website, it'll just take you to whitehouse.gov. There's no real petitioning process for the federal government anymore. Not that there ever was in the first place. You could do it on the state level, though. All right, so let's graduate from the First Amendment and move on to the Second Amendment. Let's talk about the Second Amendment, shall we? Which is, of course, the right to bear arms. Now, the Second Amendment is a tricky amendment to understand if you're just reading it on paper. Once again, I'm not asking you to know the language of the Second Amendment, but here is the entire Second Amendment right here. Let me read it to you. It says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That sentence is mayhem. What is it giving us? Is it giving us individuals the right to bear arms? If so, why is it talking about a well-regulated militia? Can I only bear an arm if I'm in a militia, a well-regulated militia, whatever that is? Well, if that's the case, then why is it saying the right of the people to keep and bear? Who gets to bear arms here? Okay, it's hard to tell when you read the Second Amendment with our 21st century brains. But the Second Amendment makes more sense if you think of it from the terms of the 1700 brains, okay? So let's think about it from the 1700s. Now, in the 1700s, we talked about this in Chapter 2, a militia was really just the townspeople. Every town kind of had their own impromptu militia. If there was a threat to the town for some reason, Paul Revere type person would ride through saying, bad guys are coming, and everybody in town, every man in town anyways, maybe a couple enterprising women, would grab their muskets and their pitchforks, meet at the town square and say, okay, who we shooting at? Who we shooting at? That right there is a militia. It's not particularly well regulated, but that's how it worked in the 1700s. And so when you think about it that way, the Second Amendment finally seems to make sense. It says a well-regulated militia is necessary to the security of a free state, so the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. See, it makes sense from the 1700s because really the people and militias were one and the same. Now that's not how it is. That's not how it is. This is today, but of course in the 1700s we didn't want the standing military. We talked about that a little bit in Chapter 2. So instead we just allowed communities to have their own militias. Now that's not how it is in the 21st century. In the 21st century, the people and our police departments and our military and our National Guard are very much not the same entities. But the Second Amendment has evolved for these modern times. The Supreme Court has found that this now means that individuals can bear arms. You don't need to be in a militia. That first part of the amendment, according to the Supreme Court, is just fluff. The important part is everything after the comma. Now, guys, allow me to, again, ask you our million-dollar question here. Stand by. There we go. Let me ask you our million-dollar question about the Second Amendment. Is this right absolute? Is the Second Amendment an absolute right? The answer is, of course not. No rights are absolute. Anytime you see the word absolute, you should say no. Nothing can be absolute in American government and politics. Heck no. Matter of fact, gun control is perfectly constitutional. Or as I say here, not unconstitutional, which is a double negative. But gun control is perfectly constitutional. There have been several gun control reforms we have passed over the years that have been accepted by the court system, including banning certain guns like assault weapons. There was a federal ban on that for a decade or so at the turn of the century. On top of that, we can mandate background checks. We can do that. We can also, certain felons can't own firearms. I don't need you to know these examples, but I do need you to know that gun control is constitutional. It is constitutional. Although, sometimes gun control may go too far, and the Supreme Court says that certain gun control is too aggressive and infringes on the Second Amendment too much. Like, for instance, Washington, D.C. once passed a handgun ban, and the Supreme Court said, no, that comes too close to violating the Second Amendment, unlike these other ones. Now, there are other amendments in the Bill of Rights, but if I could take a step back and we can talk about one of the most important conversations from Chapter 4, and that's the right to privacy. Because the right to privacy encompasses some of these other amendments that we need to familiarize ourselves with. Let me ask you a question right now. Where in the Constitution is the words right to privacy? Which amendment talks about the right to privacy? The correct answer, those words do not exist in the Constitution. Okay, there is no right to privacy, word for word, in the Constitution. And yet, we assume that we have it. Courts tell us that the Constitution gives us the right to privacy. Polls show that Americans believe they have a right to privacy. Laws are written assuming the right to privacy exists. Well, it's not in the Constitution word for word, so where do we get it? We get the right to privacy by combining a bunch of other amendments and using their implications to create the right to privacy. Let's walk through it. Now, we have already talked some about the First Amendment, and the First Amendment gives us several things. Relevant to this conversation, though, it gives us freedom of religion. Now, courts have said the freedom of religion implies that I have the freedom to keep my beliefs to myself, and I don't have to share them with the government. That implication creates what the Supreme Court says is privacy of belief. Privacy of belief. The First Amendment gives us freedom of religion, and that implies that I don't have to tell the government what I believe, which implies we have privacy of belief. Now, I suppose we could talk about the Second Amendment here, but the Supreme Court actually jumps the Second Amendment in this conversation. The Second Amendment is not used to justify or create the right to privacy. Instead, we jump the Second Amendment and we go to the Third Amendment. And the Third Amendment says you don't have to house soldiers in your home in a time of peace. Now, that was important in the 1700s. That was a big sticking point we had. One thing we really, really hated about the British military. But it's not really a big deal in the 21st century. Like, that's almost never going to happen, where the government needs to use your house. But anyways, you don't have to, though. You don't have to house soldiers in your home. And the Supreme Court says this implies that my home is my castle. I don't have to open up my home to the government. I have what the Supreme Court describes as privacy of home. Third Amendment says I don't have to house soldiers in my home. That implies I don't have to open up my home to the government. That implies a privacy of home. Now, the Fourth Amendment actually gives us several things. But pertinent to this conversation, the Fourth Amendment also gives us, in the Fourth Amendment, you have protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. Now, what counts as unreasonable? There's like a million court cases and nobody agrees what's reasonable, what's unreasonable. But regardless, the government, the implication here is that the government can't take your stuff. The stuff that you have on your person, like in your pockets or in your purse or in your book bag or in your car, the government can't just look into that for no reason. There needs to be a reason to do so. That implies that I don't have to subject myself to the government, which implies a privacy of person. Also, privacy of possessions as well, but we'll just call it privacy of person. So you see what we're doing here? Bit by bit, we're using these amendments to kind of cobble together a bubble of privacy in our life. And it continues with the Fifth Amendment. Fifth Amendment gives us several things. Most pertinent to this conversation, though, I can plead the Fifth. I don't have to testify against myself in court. If that's the case, that clearly implies that I don't have to tell the government what I know. And that implies, according to the Supreme Court, a privacy of knowledge. And so that's what we're doing here, guys. We are cobbling together several aspects of several amendments to create a bubble of privacy around in our lives. The things I know, the things I believe, okay? What I have on my person, where I live. You cobble these amendments together and you create, altogether, an implied right to privacy, according to the Supreme Court. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, hold on a second. It seems like what you're doing is you're cherry picking the Constitution, taking little nuggets here or there, bundling them together to create a right that wasn't there in the first place. To which I respond, that's exactly what I'm doing. You are very perceptive. My right to do that is actually in the 9th Amendment. The 9th Amendment is not well known, but the 9th Amendment is really the reason we have the right to privacy. Make sure you know the 9th Amendment. Here's the actual language of it. Once again, you don't need to know actual language. The 9th Amendment says the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be denied. I'm sorry, let me say that again. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. And if that doesn't make a ton of sense to you, let's put that in regular English, okay? Let's put that in regular English. Rights that you don't see in the Constitution can still exist. Rights that you don't specifically see can still exist. Like a mountain in the fog. You might not see it, but don't fly a plane through it because it's absolutely there. A right you don't see can still exist. And that's where we get the right to privacy. Really, the 9th Amendment does open a lot of conversation. I mean, it does open a little bit of a Pandora's box where we as a society argue over and over again. Do you have a right to this? Do you have a right to that? I mean, it's not in the Constitution, but it doesn't need to specifically be listed in the Constitution. Well, now we're just having courts trying to figure this out. It's very difficult sometimes to figure out where your rights begin and where they end, right? But regardless, this is where we get the right to privacy. We get it from that First Amendment, 3rd, 4th, 5th. Right, and the aspects there. And we also get it from the 9th Amendment, which ties it all together and says if these rights are clearly there, then even though they're not listed in the Constitution, they can still exist. All right, really one last thing I want to cover here in this chapter. I mean, it's a difficult conversation, right to privacy. It's hard to figure out. The right to privacy, to what exactly? Like we argue all the time what things should be private. Should your internet search browser be private? Or can the government access it if it needs to under certain circumstances or under any circumstance? There have been, obviously the reason we have abortion, a legal constitutional abortion here in America, that's what Roe v. Wade did. Roe v. Wade said abortion is a medical decision that a woman makes with her doctor. It falls under the realm of privacy and the government can't get involved. All right, so one last thing I want to talk about in this chapter is what we call due process. Due process comes from 2 different amendments. The 5th Amendment, which we'll talk about right now. This is what the 5th Amendment looks like dramatized. You get to use the 5th Amendment to protect you from the powers of the government, so it can't throw you in jail for any reason whatsoever. Here's the actual language of the 5th Amendment. Let's just focus on some specifics from it, okay? Because it gives us a lot of stuff. One of the things it gives us is due process. I cannot be deprived of my life, meaning I can't be executed. I can't be thrown in jail. I can't have my property confiscated without due process, without some degree of a trial, some sort of a trial. Now, I have a right to a grand jury if I go on trial. If I have gone on trial once for let me move over here. If I have gone on trial once for some sort of alleged crime, I can't be tried for it a second time. If they found me innocent before, but like later maybe they stumble across new evidence and maybe they have a case against me, too bad. You have already acquitted me, meaning you haven't found me guilty for it once. You can't try me a second time. On top of that, of course, you can plead the 5th, which means you don't have to testify against yourself. We get all of this from the 5th Amendment. You get a couple other things as well, as you might be able to read right here. Now, on top of that, there's also the 6th Amendment. Now, the Fifth Amendment is very concerned with protecting you from the powers of government. The Sixth Amendment is very concerned in making sure that if you go on trial, that there are rules that everybody has to follow. That's kind of what the Sixth Amendment is really concerned about. Here's the actual language of the Sixth Amendment. You're free to read it if you want, but let's go through a list of some of the things the Sixth Amendment gives us. One thing it gives you is a speedy public trial. You can't be tried in secret, except under extreme circumstances. You can't be tried in secret. You got to be tried in public. Every person who is in prison right now, you can go and find the reason why the courts threw them in jail. It's public information. You're also entitled to a speedy case. Now, speedy, I'm putting that in quotes because the Constitution does say a speedy trial right here, actually. Actually, I can't. Right in here. I can't step over the image no matter how much I'd like to. But are courts ever speedy? Not really. Not really, but as speedy as is reasonable, considering the circumstances. On top of that, you also can compel an attorney. You can hire your own attorney, and if you can't afford an attorney, the government can provide one to you. On top of that, you also have the right to an impartial jury. Not only do you have a right to a grand jury, you have a right to an impartial jury of your peers. That sometimes creates consternation and problems. On top of that, you get to know who your accusers are. You get to know what charges and evidence is being used against you. And if you need somebody to testify on your behalf, you can compel them. You can force them to come and show up. So the Sixth Amendment, particularly obsessed with making sure that everything kind of goes by a fair set of rules. All right, and the last, these rights can get very complicated, especially when it comes to juries. That stuff ends up in front of the Supreme Court all the time. And who should these rights appeal to? Should they be for American citizens only? Should they also be for immigrants? What about people like POWs, people we've caught in war, prisoners of war? Maybe in Guantanamo is not even on U.S. soil. So if you're not an American and you've been captured by the U.S. military and you're not even held on American soil, should you have these same Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights that American citizens enjoy? And the Supreme Court, SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, has ruled that yes, they too have access to habeas corpus. You cannot have their body, have their corpse. You cannot have their body and deprive them of life, liberty, and property without due process as well. Guys, that brings us to a close. This is a big, big chapter full of complicated stuff. I hope you were able to track along okay. If you feel like you need better explanations on some things, or if you have any questions about anything I've presented, please reach out to me. Again, I really want to stress to you that you watch these as we present them and you come to me when you have questions and not wait till the day before the exam. Best of luck in your preparations, and I'll see you next time.